A cold wave swept across the globe. In less than a month, global temperatures plunged by 200 degrees. Under relentless blizzards, the entire surface of the Earth turned into a giant ball of ice. This time, the extreme cold had truly arrived. Early one morning, my phone kept ringing non-stop. I answered irritably. It was my cousin, whom I hadn't spoken to in over a year. "What's wrong, sis? Why are you calling so early?" "Tian, I need to tell you something serious. Every word I'm about to say is not a joke. You need to listen carefully." Her serious tone instantly woke me up. "Did something terrible happen? What is it? Don't scare me." The latest monitoring data from the National Climate Center shows that the strongest La Niña event in history may be coming. Many countries at high latitudes have already entered winter early. The warning sign is unusually warm weather. After the warmth, temperatures will drop sharply. It could bring the earliest winter humanity has ever seen. In about a month, the whole world is expected to face an unprecedented large-scale cooling event, an ice age apocalypse. "What are you talking about, sis? What ice age apocalypse? You mean like the movie Ice Age?" I was completely baffled. Was today April Fool's Day? Your uncle and aunt got this information through their work at the Meteorological Bureau. There's no time. We've already found a shelter and stocked up on supplies. You need to start preparing too. And tell your parents about this. My cousin's voice suddenly cut off. It was as if someone had deliberately ended the call. What was that about? That wasn't even a funny joke. I ignored it and went back to sleep. The next day, when I went downstairs to pick up my food delivery, I noticed the temperature really was strange. It was already November, yet the sun was still scorching. The sky was perfectly clear. I didn't feel cold even in a t-shirt. I almost felt like wearing a dress. A week passed. The weather was still abnormally warm. In fact, it seemed to be getting even warmer. That was when I couldn't help thinking about what my cousin had said. She had never really joked with me before. I started getting uneasy. I decided to call her again and ask what was really going on. "Hello. The number you have dialed is not in service." A cold automated voice came from the other end. How did her number suddenly become disconnected? Maybe it was a woman's intuition. But remembering how serious she had sounded, I began to feel increasingly anxious. Forget it. Better safe than sorry. I have to start preparing today. I decided to order supplies online. Nothing fancy, mostly quilts, hand warmers, extra thick down jackets, and insulated pants. I've always been obsessed with apocalypse stories. I've watched countless disaster movies, but if the apocalypse my cousin described really came, I had no idea whether these preparations would actually keep me alive. At that point, I was still only half convinced. But anxiety and fear had already begun to grow inside me. A month sounds like a long time, but it really isn't. A week had already passed since I first heard the warning. Counting the days I'd wasted at the beginning of the month, I had less than 3 weeks left. I absolutely couldn't delay the early preparations. Through a friend, I rented a villa with a huge 3-level basement. Once the extreme cold arrived, there was no telling when the power or heating would fail. No matter how well insulated the upper floors were, eventually they would become unlivable, so we'd have to move underground. I planned to reinforce both sides of the walls with 5 layers of freeze-resistant concrete. The doors and windows would all be blast-resistant. I didn't waste any time. I immediately found the best renovation company in the area and only got them to take the job by offering double the price. The workers came that very day to reinforce the walls and add insulation. Since the supplies I ordered online wouldn't arrive until next week, I told them the job had to be finished before next Monday because I paid generously. The crew worked incredibly hard. Not only did they finish quickly, the quality was excellent. They even completed the work a day ahead of schedule. I happily paid the remaining balance. Before they left, I also warned them that temperatures might drop soon and told them to keep warm. I didn't sit idle that week either. I bought huge quantities of disposable heat packs and portable heaters, rechargeable hand warmers, and 72-hour heating patches. During the renovation, I also had them install a fireplace and chimney. Just in case. To be extra safe, I installed surveillance cameras around the entrance. I also ordered 300 cases of instant noodles, 200 cases of self-heating hot pot, 50 cases of snacks, 30 cases of compressed biscuits, 12 cases of sausages, 10 cases of braised foods, 500 large jugs of water, 100 cases of bottled water, 200 bags of rice, and a ton of flour. I bought just about every kind of food that could be stored long-term. On top of that, I bought various seeds, seasonings, daily necessities, and plenty of cat litter. Everything was first delivered to trucks I'd rented in advance, then secretly transported back home in the middle of the night. After working through the entire night, I finally got all the supplies inside. Then I collapsed onto the sofa. Too exhausted to move. Time passed quickly. Once I'd stocked up on almost everything, I brought my parents over too. After they arrived, I told them what my cousin had said about the coming extreme cold apocalypse and explained everything to them. My parents were shocked and naturally skeptical, but both my cousin and I had always been well-behaved and level-headed in their eyes, so they eventually believed me, at least halfway. There was nothing else I could do. In the apocalypse that was about to come, all I could do was protect my family. With the temperature drop approaching, I was completely overwhelmed. I had to buy supplies and reinforce the underground shelter, while constantly thinking about what we might still be missing. To better withstand the bitter cold, I continued buying more foods with long shelf lives. I even bought a lot of alcohol. If temperatures became unbearably low, a little alcohol might at least help us feel warmer. I also stored a large amount of meat. At low temperatures, meat would keep for a very long time. After all those supplies were stored, the day of the extreme cold was drawing near. I became more anxious with every passing day. I had never imagined that an apocalypse could actually happen to me. It was nighttime. There was no moon in the sky, yet the sky was strangely bright. Its color was also turning a dark red. I walked to the window and stared outside in shock. Snowflakes had already begun to fall. Could this be the beginning of the apocalypse? Less than a month after the extreme cold began, global temperatures plunged by 200 degrees. Under relentless blizzards, the entire surface of the Earth turned into a giant ball of ice. This time, the apocalypse had truly arrived. Early the next morning, the snow was still only falling lightly. But within just 2 hours, those scattered flakes turned into a raging blizzard of huge snowflakes. My parents and I stood behind the villa's windows, watching the snowfall grow heavier and denser. The white layer in the yard kept rising. Right next to our villa was a large farmer's market. The vendors' shouts came in wave after wave, like people rushing to buy New Year's supplies. Everyone was stocking up. That wasn't surprising at all. With snow falling like this, everyone knew what was coming. The temperature drop was on its way. Once the real cold hit, who would want to go out every day in knife-like wind just to buy groceries? Just imagining it made my face hurt. By the afternoon, I glanced outside again without thinking. The snow was already up to my ankles, and it was still falling. It was as if the snow had a grudge against the ground. At first, the flakes were only about the size of coins. Now some were as big as a child's fist. My parents watched and kept shaking their heads. They said that in more than 50 years of life, they had never seen snow this outrageous. The three of us were staying on the villa's 3rd floor, each in a separate room for the time being. It wasn't cold enough yet to force us underground. There was no need to lock ourselves inside the basement survival zone ahead of time, unless we had absolutely no choice. None of us wanted to live underground. I'd been under constant stress for days, wound tight like a spring. So I went back to my room to catch up on sleep. When I woke up, the house was still warm. The air conditioner was running, as if nothing had happened. The internet was still working too. The news said the city would start central heating tomorrow. Then they aired report after report, all repeating the same thing. This was the largest snowfall ever recorded. They also warned everyone to avoid unnecessary travel and to stay home if possible. I walked to the window and opened it just a crack. A blast of freezing air rushed in. I shuddered instantly and slammed the window shut. I glanced at the thermometer on the wall. It was still 26 degrees inside. The air conditioner was working normally. Central heating hadn't started yet, but at least we still had electricity. Even if half the sky fell down, we could still hold out. Before long, my parents returned to their normal work routine. 9 to 5, just like before. On the surface, life still seemed ordinary, even comfortable. Once the heating came on, we barely needed the air conditioner. It was warm enough to wear t-shirts indoors. The villa stayed around 28 degrees. The heating really was powerful this year. The internet never went down either. Nothing much changed for us. But the outside world was far from calm. Many places across the country were being hit by blizzards one after another. This abnormal snowfall was unprecedented. The authorities even gave it a name: the Northern Warm Winter Blizzard Season. 2 weeks passed in the blink of an eye. For 14 straight days, the sky stayed dark red. It was as if the sun had been permanently muted. It never showed itself again. During those 2 weeks, since the cold still hadn't become deadly, we stocked up on even more fresh vegetables. But as the temperature kept falling, prices kept climbing. Everyone was hoarding vegetables for the winter. No one wanted to go out and freeze. Vendors took full advantage and raised prices sharply. The days dragged on one by one. The temperature dropped every day. To keep the house at 28 degrees, we basically had to rely on the air conditioner. There were hardly any pedestrians or cars outside. The children who had been having snowball fights not long ago had stopped going outside too. This was a wealthy neighborhood, after all. The heating and security were both excellent. As long as we stayed indoors, life was still barely manageable. But when I checked news from elsewhere, I heard about other regions. In some places, the persistent low temperatures had forced all outdoor work to stop. The disaster had come too suddenly. Many people without access to heating had no choice but to crowd into emergency shelters. Fortunately, our neighborhood remained relatively stable. Every household had stocked a fair amount of food. Electricity and heating were still working, so we hadn't reached the point of needing to evacuate. Another week passed. Today, it was especially cold outside, the kind of cold that felt like ice shards were being forced into your bones. The temperature inside the house had dropped too. I checked the thermometer, 21 degrees. I immediately turned on the air conditioner. By now, our house could no longer rely on central heating alone. The heating system was still barely running, but it was clearly weaker than before. Today, quite a few residents had already started leaving the neighborhood. The heating was still barely holding on, but their food supplies were probably running out. Some people were still stubbornly staying put, thinking it was just a heavy snowstorm, and there was no need to panic. They figured buying a little more food would be enough. Just then, a message in the homeowners group pulled me back to reality. Someone asked if anyone had fever medicine. Their child had a fever. Seeing that message made me feel terrible. But in an apocalypse like this, I had to put my family's safety first. So I didn't reply in the group. If people found out we had supplies, trouble might come straight to our door. A few more days passed. The outdoor temperature had fallen to minus 40 degrees, and it was still dropping. Before long, it hit minus 48. The cold was becoming almost inhuman. Then the snow started again. At first it was light, but soon it turned back into a heavy blizzard. Finally, residents began leaving for the shelters one after another. Car after car drove out, like a line of people evacuating a venue. The family who had asked for help earlier still hadn't left. This time, they tagged me directly in the group. Their message sounded almost desperate. Please save us. We're out of food. Our child will starve if he doesn't eat. My mind went blank for a second. How did they know I had supplies? Had they seen me using them at night? No matter what, I couldn't respond. The three of us kept lying low inside the villa and held out for more than half a month. That family stopped posting later. Maybe they finally couldn't take it anymore and went to a shelter. Gradually, I pushed the whole thing out of my mind. By then, the temperature outside had fallen below -80 degrees. The homeowners group was filled with complaints every day. Food was almost impossible to buy now. Even when someone had something to sell, the price was absurd. Since this was a wealthy neighborhood, people started offering ridiculous trades. Someone offered a car for 1 bag of rice. Someone else offered a luxury watch for 2 loaves of bread. But after those messages were posted, it was like throwing stones into a bottomless well. No one answered. Less than a month after the extreme cold began, global temperatures plunged by 200 degrees. Under relentless blizzards, the entire surface of the Earth turned into a giant ball of ice. This time, the apocalypse had truly arrived. I roughly calculated the food we still had on the upper floors. It would last maybe another half a month. After that, we'd have to move underground. Not because we wanted to, but because we'd have no choice. Even with the air conditioner running, the house could barely stay at 15 degrees. The heating system was getting weaker and weaker, like an exhausted employee working overtime and slowly giving up. Every household in the neighborhood was complaining about running out of food. The atmosphere grew more anxious by the day. Finally, even our neighbors couldn't hold out anymore. They started packing to head for the shelters. Someone posted photos of a shelter in the group. I zoomed in on them, and my heart sank. It was packed like a train during the holiday rush. People were pressed against each other, barely able to turn around. Worse still, the shelter had already exceeded its capacity. As soon as another group reached the entrance, the doors were shut and no one else was admitted. I was scrolling through the group chat, trying to see if there was any other option, when suddenly there was a deafening crash. All 3 of us jumped. That wasn't thunder. It was the sharp sound of breaking glass. We looked toward the noise. The shopping mall next door, which had been turned into a shelter, had its glass smashed open. People and cars packed the area outside. It was as if everyone had received the same signal and rushed inside like mad. The scene descended into chaos in seconds. I even heard gunshots, short and piercing, as if they had snapped the last thread, holding everyone's nerves together. Before I could even see who pushed whom, or who attacked whom, my dad was already pulling us back inside. He kept his voice low, but there was no hiding the urgency in it. Just like that, he dragged me back into the house. I didn't see everything that happened afterward, but I remembered one thing. In a single night, the world had changed, and the most frightening thing wasn't just the natural disaster. It was human nature. When rules are torn apart like paper, there's no telling how far people can go. At that moment, I didn't dare think about it. My phone vibrated again. A new message appeared in the homeowners group, flashing before my eyes like a knife. House 109 has supplies. I asked them for some before, and they refused to give me anything. Everyone, let's go together and take their supplies. Otherwise, we'll die. Why should selfish people like them get to live comfortably? I stared at the message for 2 seconds, and actually laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it chilled me to the bone. Amazing. We hadn't even reached the final stage of the apocalypse, and someone was already writing a manifesto for righteous robbery. I turned to my parents and said, "We can't wait any longer. Leave the supplies upstairs for them to fight over." I said it lightly, but the meaning was serious. I adjusted the surveillance cameras, almost like setting up a stage. The entrance, living room, and stairs were all visible at a glance.
Then I turned off the air conditioner
and put away the remote. I wasn't going to leave those people any comfort. Packing wasn't complicated. We only took the essentials. Then the three of us headed straight into the basement. When my dad saw the reinforced doors down there, he froze on the spot. His mouth hung open for a long moment. He pointed at the door as if he were looking at alien technology. Even a grenade might not get through this thing. I held back a laugh. Exactly. It's ballistic grade. The real deal. My dad's expression practically said, "Not bad, kid." As soon as we sealed the door, I opened the surveillance feed on my phone. Sure enough, not long afterward, the front door of our house was broken open. A crowd poured inside. They were carrying all kinds of things. Some that looked like tools from a toolbox. Others like they had grabbed them from kitchens. They rushed into the first floor. The moment they saw the supplies, their eyes lit up like they'd found treasure. At first they cursed each other, then they started fighting. Over those few supplies. They fought like starving wolves over meat. Fists and metal bars started flying. Over the next few days, I practically watched the cameras like a TV series. Those uninvited guests spent every day trying to figure out how to open our basement door, and every day they failed. Every failure made them angrier. The supplies kept dwindling. The hungrier they became, the more vicious they got. Then they started turning on one another again. Slowly, the people on the screen disappeared one by one. In the end, only one man remained. He stood in the living room and curled his lips into a smile. It was an especially unsettling smile. Watching him made my skin crawl. It wasn't the smile of someone who had won. It was the smile of someone willing to do absolutely anything. Another month passed. When I checked the cameras again, I saw that somehow he had gotten hold of a grenade. He shouted at the camera like he was putting on a show. "Just wait until I get in there. Your whole family is going to regret it." Then he ran. The next second, there was a deafening explosion. The blast was so strong I could feel the floor shake. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. But more than anything, I was grateful that I hadn't cut corners on those doors and walls. The triple-layer reinforced structure held. There was only superficial damage. Nothing more than a few scratches. The man raged outside helplessly, then eventually left deflated after all that shouting. Another month passed. The central heating system failed completely. Strangely, the electricity and internet were still working. I kept watching him through the cameras. He had eaten everything he could find. He looked completely drained. His movements were slow and his eyes empty. He was utterly exhausted. The temperature inside the house had fallen to a terrifying level. Outside was even worse. In just a few months, the temperature had dropped as if falling into a bottomless pit, and it was still going down. For the first time, I truly understood just how insignificant humanity is before nature, pitifully small. I'd imagined all kinds of apocalypse scenarios before. They seemed exciting, even thrilling. But when disaster is really hanging over your head, there's only one reaction left. Fear. That kind of fear isn't something you can fake. It rises instinctively from your bones. All we could do was hide in this tiny underground space. Whether we slowly used up our supplies, or simply waited for death, we just had to survive a little longer than everyone else. 2 more days passed. On the surveillance feed, I saw the man lying on the bed. He hadn't moved all day. He didn't eat, drink, or even turn over. It was as if he had frozen solid. I even wondered whether he was already... But I couldn't bring myself to say it. The temperature kept dropping. With a cold, terrifying regularity, every day was a little colder than the last. Then one day, I watched the number jump from ridiculous to even more ridiculous. Only one thought remained in my mind. This world really can drive people insane. And somehow, we continued without incident. Another month passed. The temperature drop finally began to slow, as if the cold itself no longer had the strength to keep falling. But outside, it was already cold enough to freeze exposed skin almost instantly. Going outside was impossible. The days became repetitive. My phone ran out of power. One light after another began to fail. I moved my bed into the master bedroom and slept in the same room as my parents. It saved heat. The 3 of us huddled together and it really was a little warmer. We piled on layer after layer of blankets. We stacked layer after layer of pads underneath. Getting onto the bed now felt like climbing a mountain. It took real effort. Half our heating supplies were already gone. And hope that the apocalypse would end was fading instead of growing. I slept less and less. Anxiety felt like thorns growing from my body, impossible to pull out or escape. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I tossed and turned endlessly. My mum noticed. She called me into the living room. She moved quietly, afraid of waking my dad. She handed me a hand warmer. I shook my head, but she said, "Tiantian." Mum knows how hard you've been holding everything together. She paused, then added, "But remember this, no matter what happens, your dad and I will stay with you until the very end." I've been holding everything in for too long. Those words opened the floodgates. I hugged her and cried as quietly as I could. As if I were afraid even hope itself might wake up and shatter. She gently patted my back and stroked my head. Between sobs I said, "You have to keep that promise." She kept patting me and replied, "Mum promises." Time continued to pass. 6 months went by. Then one day I suddenly heard the air conditioner running. I used to think that sound was annoying. Now it sounded heavenly. I instinctively looked over. The air conditioner was actually working again. My mind instantly cleared. What was going on? Was the temperature rising? Had the power been restored? Did this mean the apocalypse was finally ending? I practically shouted, "The electricity is back." I immediately charged my phone. When I turned it on, the signal was back too. Sure enough, new messages appeared. The message roughly said, "We apologize for the delayed notice. The northern warm winter blizzard season is entering its final stage. The relevant authorities have done everything possible to repair power cables in affected areas. Communications and heating systems will continue to be restored. Please trust that no survivor will be abandoned." At that moment, it felt as if the huge weight on my chest finally began to lift. Another 3 months passed. Once the electricity became stable, our lives finally started feeling like lives again. The three of us no longer had to huddle together for warmth. We no longer had to drink ice-cold water that made our teeth ache. We no longer had to feel our way through the darkness. Every few days, I checked the latest updates on my phone. More and more places were recovering. Electricity and internet service were coming back. Surface temperatures were slowly rising too. We still couldn't return above ground. But everything was getting better. The apocalyptic disaster finally seemed to be nearing its end. I looked at the glowing lights and the full signal bars on my phone. And a thought suddenly came to me. If hope has returned, can sunshine really be that far behind?